Hello everyone, welcome to Trade Talk Tuesday on Blazers Uprise. I'm Eric Brandt. If you have any trade suggestions for future videos, please leave them in the comments below. I wanted to start today by talking about an Instagram comment Dame made the other day. It was CJ's 29th birthday. Happy birthday to you, CJ. But in a post wishing him a happy birthday, someone commented, "Trade that man," in regards to CJ, and Dame actually took the time to respond to that by saying, FOH boy. Now, FOH means F out of here, like Melo likes to say when he grabs a rebound. I don't think you can read too much into whether or not this means we would ever trade CJ, but I do think when Dame makes a comment like this, it does solidify the fact that we probably will not trade CJ. Now, despite these comments, I still want to talk about CJ trade ideas. We've mentioned that there aren't a whole lot of options to trade for the Blazers this offseason, so we've got to keep those trade suggestions coming. If you're going to come up with CJ trades, though, please look at it from the other team's perspective and think to yourself, why would they want to make this trade? For example, Boston Celtics are not going to trade Jaylen Brown for CJ McCollum. It just doesn't make sense. They already have Kemba Walker, who's kind of a scoring guard, who's not great on defense. And Jaylen Brown is a better defender. He's a bigger player. He's younger. He just fits their roster better than a CJ would. They don't really need a guy like CJ necessarily. So they're not going to make that trade. So just kind of factor in the other team's perspective into that. Another example of a CJ trade would be this one from Jordan Hutchinson, who says we should trade CJ to the Brooklyn Nets for Spencer Dinwiddie and Caris LeVert. If I'm the Nets, I don't think pairing Kyrie Irving with CJ is a great backcourt tandem. Of course, offensively it is. I just don't like the way that was set up their defense. For the Blazers, they should have a deep roster already, even if you just ran it back next season. So I don't really like trading a guy like CJ for lesser parts to try and get a better overall team. I just don't think that makes sense. You could make the argument that someday Caris LeVert might be a better player than CJ, but right now he isn't, and he has also been injury prone his first few years in the league, so I'm not sure if a trade like this would be a good move for the Blazers. If I was trying to make it work, I would say that Brooklyn would probably have to add in a first-round pick or some sort of other asset to make it a little more valuable. I'd also probably try to find a third team for Spencer Dinwiddie because I don't think his style of play fits in on our roster, especially with Stotts as the head coach. But overall, this isn't the type of CJ trade I would be looking at. I would only deal him if we were getting a significant upgrade as part of a bigger trade. A guy that was brought up in the comments a lot from the previous video was TJ Warren. Now, TJ Warren was probably the Pacers' second best player throughout the season this year. He was definitely their best player in the bubble, and I just don't think they're going to be looking to deal a guy like that, so you'd have to give up a ton to even get them to consider it. So it's hard for me to break down what kind of trade we could make to get TJ Warren when I don't think he's available, and I don't really think we have the right pieces to get that deal done. Our next trade comes from Steve Sandstrom, who suggests trading Trevor Ariza, Anthony Simons, and the number 16 pick for Dennis Schroder of the Oklahoma City Thunder. In a vacuum, this is actually a very fair trade. Oklahoma City gets a pick and a young asset for Dennis Schroder. Portland would get a really capable player who was in the running for Sixth Man of the Year this past season. The reason why I probably wouldn't pull the trigger on a trade like this is Trevor Ariza plays a position that we desperately need at small forward. He has length and defensive ability that Schroder doesn't necessarily have, but also if you bring in a guy like Schroder, you're already limiting how many minutes he can play based on the fact that we already have Dame and CJ. So it's just not a good fit, especially since running the 3-guard small lineups I don't think is a great idea with a guy like Schroder. He did shoot the three pretty well this past season, but overall in his career hasn't been a great three-point shooter. So in Portland's situation, I probably pass on this trade, but I do like the suggestion, and I do think this was a great trade idea, just not right for Portland at this particular time. Our next idea comes from Austin Samuels, who suggests trading Trevor Ariza and the number 16 pick to the Orlando Magic for Terrence Ross. Despite the cool storylines of Terrence Ross coming to his hometown of Portland, I don't like this trade at all. I know, big surprise. But Terrence Ross shot 35.1% from 3 this year and 40.3% overall. He's an average defender, not a great rebounder, doesn't pass much. At 6'6", we already have a guy in Gary Trent on this roster who I'd much rather just give those minutes to. And then if you're talking about losing Ariza and not replacing him with another defensive forward, I think we lose a little bit of overall roster flexibility that way. Our last trade idea of the week comes from Wampink Gaming. He suggests trading Mario Hezonja, Anthony Simons, the number 16 pick, and the number 46 pick to the Chicago Bulls for Lauri Markkanen. In his comment, he mentioned that this is probably a dumb idea, but I actually think this is the classic case of a buy low trade scenario. What that means is you still have a player on his rookie deal who has shown some flashes in the past of being a really good and effective player. His shooting numbers dipped this year to 34.4% from 3 and 42.5% overall. Also, his rebounding numbers were a little down, so you wonder if that had to do with Jim Boylan being a terrible coach. But they have a new GM this offseason, and he might not be attached to him like the previous regime was. So I would definitely call on players like this and see if you can get a bargain. Now, in the past, Lauri Markkanen specifically, I haven't been too high on because I think he's a terrible fit with Dame and CJ as your backcourt on defense. Offensively, I think he's the type of guy who has the potential to pop and have much better shooting numbers on an offense like Portland's versus Chicago's. And he's still young enough to where he could improve a lot versus a guy like Aaron Gordon, who has already been in the league for 6 years and hasn't really shown the ability to improve at all over that time. Considering he'll probably be a defensive liability, I'm kind of shocking myself by even thinking about this trade. But since he fits into our trade exception, I definitely call Chicago, offer the number 16 pick for him, just see how available he really is, and maybe add a couple more assets. I wouldn't go overboard, but overall, I think this was a pretty good trade suggestion. I don't know if I would do it how you presented it, but it's definitely a guy I would call and inquire about. That's going to do it for this episode of Trade Talk Tuesday. I really appreciate everyone for watching. I also really like to read your guys' trade ideas, so please keep them coming in the comments below. And until next time, as always, peace out, go Blazers.